Greetings, brethren, Hausburger Donkey here, and the big speed painting of my Republican Romans has begun, and I thought I'd do videos as I go along and show you the progress. So, let me just remove these ones, and just quickly sort of give you an overview of how many there are. This is the whole lot in this box. And then there's also, to be more careful with this one, there's a box of shields that are still on the sprue. You have the scutums, and we have the, or scutai, whatever. And we have the small buckler shields that I'm going to need for all the miniatures. And they all started out like this. I just put 4 of them to a spatula. Wrote all the units down. So this is the second maniple, Principii, second unit, second stand. So there's going to be 2 stands to each unit, and 2 units of each Principii or Principes and Hastati to each maniple, 1 unit of Triarii, a command stand, some Velitas, and some skirmishes. Yeah, they also I primed them all white with the airbrush. You can do that with a rattle can as well. And then the very first step is to wash them all. These ones, like most of them, I washed with a homemade dark brown wash. So I mixed like a sort of a burnt umber brown wash and a black wash together, because we want to get something that's relatively dark. You can also just use Agrax Earthshade from Games Workshop. However, when you do projects as big as this, you go through the wash really quickly, so it becomes kind of expensive, and I would not recommend it. It's better to use cheaper washes. In this case, the homemade one. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to go all over the figure. And we're looking for it to not pool too extremely, but if there is some pooling, it doesn't really matter that much, because we're going to go over that several times. But we want to try to avoid any just extreme dark pools. And what I usually do is I start with with one side of the miniature, do the whole side, and then turn the strip around and do the other side. You want to do figure by figure and not do the front of all of them and then turn them all around, because the wash will dry and you'll get water lines. And we do want to kind of avoid those. If you have too much wash, you can rub it off on the next one and continue to sort of get rid of any excess pools on the first one. We missed a bit under the arm, a bit under the shirt. Alright, now he's done. Now we can go over to the next one. And I'll just do these 2 and then do the other 2 off camera, because, well, don't need to see all 4 of them. It's the same process. And what I'm going to do is, with these videos, I'm going to sort of go along and also time my progress. Washing them all dark brown took about 1 hour and 20 minutes, I want to say. So it is a little tedious, but I will say I have already become so much faster in getting the wash on the way I wanted to, with, you know, not too much pooling and getting it everywhere. So yeah, the more you do this sort of thing, the faster you get at it, and the more time it saves. Alright, he looks pretty good. Missed a bit on the ear. There we go. Missed a little bit on the pilum, but that doesn't really matter. Right. Alright, we're pretty much done. Alright, and then you go through all of the figures like that. And also the shields. Let me just grab one sprue of shields. So with the shields I did the same thing. I washed them with the homemade dark brown wash on both sides. I didn't really bother with the holes where the fist goes, because, yeah, you're going to put glue in there, so it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see it at the end. And then the next step is that we will, all of these washed miniatures and shields, we're going to dry brush white. And I'm going to do a shield and a figure just to show you. So let's just take that stand of Velitas. Let me just get the Principes I started out of the way. Do them later. Actually wash the brush out again. Make sure that it doesn't go. Oh yeah, and the brush I use for this, by the way, is a super cheap brush that I bought a set of on Amazon, I want to say. They come with really long hairs, but I just manually cut it down. You can see it's not even perfectly rounded or straight, but that doesn't matter because it's just a wash brush. And you want to use super cheap brushes for washes because washes just screw up your brushes so quickly. All right, as I said, next step is to dry brush them white. So we'll get some white on the tile. I don't use the wet palette for dry brushing because it's kind of a waste of time. Because you need a lot of paint anyway, and you go through it pretty quickly. So let me just show this off better. So taking a little bit onto the brush, and just gonna grab the paper, and then just work it in. You can do this with other brushes if you have them. For example, do I have one lying here somewhere? I don't want to go and get one. Yeah, I have one. All right. You can also do this with makeup brushes. They're pretty good, but they are a little soft, so it'll take longer. With this one, we actually want something that's bristly and a bit stronger, because we're gonna go pretty rough on these, except for the feathers, because they are sensitive. They might break off, but everything else is. Well, put some paint on there. All right. Everything else is sturdy enough that we can just go over it harshly. And we're just going to... That's actually not nearly enough paint, because we want this to end up being pretty much almost white. And you just go over it. Like so. And what this does is, because I'm going to be working on these with decals, the decals from, I have them here, from Little Big Man Studios, and they're not traditional water slide transfers. They are sort of see-through stickers, and so you want to have a white undercoat, but I actually like having a little bit of texture on the shield underneath it, because it just gives the see-through sticker a little bit more of volume and makes it look even more realistic at the end. And then the rest of it, we don't really care about the quality of the dry brush, because in the end we're just going to glaze over that, and that's what we end up with. So we have some nice pre-shading, and if you can see that, I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but here you can see it from the dry brushing and the wash underneath. There's some nice texture on it, and that at the end will show through the colored stickers, and it will also show through the glazes that we're going to put on the miniatures. So now we're going to do one of the miniatures, and as I said, just for quick reference, when you do on these miniatures, I'm gonna hold a finger against the feathers and then go over them like this. A little bit less pressure, because we don't want them to break off. Like so. That's what we want. Because then we only need a dark gray or a black glaze, and they'll be done, the feathers. But I'll do that later. We just will dry brush one of these Velitas. I'm going to start on the fur, and this can be pretty rough. It doesn't have to be a really nice gradient dry brush. All we're really trying to do is get color on pretty much all of the raised areas. So we want to reset the white basically, but we want to keep the deepest shadows from the dark brown wash. And what that'll do is if we put over a glaze, it'll give us a lovely transition, kind of in the same way that how a zenithal highlight works when you do that with an airbrush or with rattle cans. But it isn't zenithal for one, and it gives you more of sort of a gritty appearance. So I really like this for historical miniatures especially, because it just gives them some texture that otherwise you miss. And you know, when you work with glazes or highly pigmented colors or bright colors or something like contrast paints, you can very quickly get to a point where the miniatures look cartoony, and that's great for fantasy miniatures. But I find it's a bit too much for historicals. So this just gives you a nicer sort of realistic, a bit dusty look to everything. And especially on the clothes, it gives you a wonderful sort of rough texture that will be very convincing as cloth. If you followed me for a while, I have done this before in my zombie painting video. I did sort of a little run through, but in this multi-part tutorial, I will go through every stage of what I do with this speed painting stuff. And it will be extra speed painty because I'm actually gonna not do the skin properly, which is what I usually do. But with how many figures this is, I'm actually gonna glaze and contrast this time. All right, we're pretty much there. This is kind of what we're aiming for. I'll show you exactly there. So I spend a little bit more time on the skin this time than I usually do, because usually when I actually paint the skin, it doesn't matter, because you know I don't need that pre-shade since I go over afterwards with regular paints and you know, give it proper highlights and everything. But since I'm not going to do that this time, we do need a proper pre-shade on the skin. So it's a little bit more work this way with the dry brushing for sure, but it will really speed up the glazing and contrasting process. All right, there we are. And now I'm gonna continue doing this for all of the shields and all of the figures. Get them nice and dry brushed. After a while, you'll have to change your brush. So I have several of these large dry brushes, and you will need to swap them intermittently, because when they get really locked up, because we need a lot more paint to do this sort of dry brushing, they get sort of clumped up and locked up, and then you get really streaky and just gunky paint application, and you don't want that. So make sure, I would say, probably after every 20 to 30 figures, you'll have to swap brushes or wash this one out, take a break, wait till it's dry, and then go again. It's also, if the brush is a little bit damp, that's not so bad actually. Let me actually just dunk it into my water. And we'll soak off most of the water. And then we'll grab some paint. Oh, actually I can't do that. Because see, this is something you need to watch out for. Actually, I'm gonna show you the paper. Whoop. You see, there's some previous paint still in the dry brush. So now that I made it wet, it's no longer white. It's sort of a bluish color now. So that's something to look out for. I'm gonna have to change my brush now and clean this one out properly. All right, but yeah, this is where we at. And I'm going to continue this for the whole lot, and then in the next video I'll show you how to do the glazes for the skin and for the clothes, because that'll be the next step. Alright, hope you enjoyed this, and well, have fun with your speed painting projects if you have them. Otherwise, enjoy your painting, and I'll hope to see you in the next video. Take care guys, bye bye.